It began with a laugh, the kind of laugh that fills a studio before anyone decides whether it's safe to breathe. On the Graham Norton Show, those laughs are currency. They bounce off the red sofa, roll across the audience, and settle into the bright air like confetti. But that night, something different moved beneath the noise, something no one recognized until it was too late. Ryan Gosling sat under the studio lights with the same easy posture that had made him a late-night favorite. Relaxed shoulders, quiet smile, eyes that stayed calm even when the jokes cut close. For years, he'd mastered the art of playing along, but every performance, even the polished ones, hides a limit. Blame. The audience glowed. Graham leaned forward with that signature grin, playful, fearless, a little dangerous. And then came the question, a simple setup, a teasing line, a joke about Eva Mendez. It wasn't the first time her name had floated into an interview like an invitation to poke fun, but this one didn't land soft. It wasn't gentle. It wasn't clever. It was the kind that slides under the skin, sharp enough to sting, casual enough to deny. Go there? Ryan said it quietly, almost too quietly, but it sliced through the laughter like a wire pulled tight. A hush cracked open the room. Not silence, something worse. A waiting. Graham playfully shrugged. Oh, come on, it's all in good fun, isn't it? But that wasn't the question anymore. They laughed again, but this time it was thinner, uncertain. They sensed it, the shift in temperature, the invisible line crossed without warning. Ryan's jaw moved, just slightly, a small exhale, the kind you release when you're trying to stay steady. He had come to promote a movie, not to unravel on national television. But pain doesn't wait for permission, it waits for opportunity. And this one hit a bruise he'd kept carefully covered. Aren't jokes, he murmured, eyes fixed on the desk between them. Graham, sensing the resistance, tried redirecting, but the damage had already threaded itself through the moment. The kind of damage that doesn't vanish with a smile. A soft laugh escaped someone in the front row. The wrong sound at the worst time. Ryan's head lifted. His expression held no anger, no theatrical flair, just disappointment. A kind so raw it made the studio feel suddenly small. Let's move on, he said. No smile, no polite filter, just the truth exposed. Graham paused. Not long, but long enough for the audience to understand that something real had surfaced. And then he pushed again. Just a little. Just enough. A follow-up joke, a nudge, a callback to the first comment, a second twist of the knife, maybe without meaning to, maybe without realizing what he was stepping into. Ryan's lips parted like he had. Something to say, something sharp, something final. But the words died before they reached the air. Instead, he stood. Slowly. Deliberately. Every eye in the room tracking the movement like a scene unfolding in slow motion. No dramatic shout, no storming footsteps, just a quiet decision. He was done. The audience gasped as he stepped away from the sofa, the lights catching the edge of his expression. Hurt, disbelief, a kind of exhaustion that didn't belong in a comedy show. Graham called after him, half laughing, half confused. He didn't turn back. Whispered, "Is this part of the bit?" Another voice answered, "I don't think so." Ryan called rolling. They always do. Hungry, patient, ready to catch the moment a celebrity cracks open. But this wasn't a breakdown. It was something colder, more controlled, a boundary drawn in real time. Disappeared past the curtain, into the shadowed hallway behind the stage, a world the audience never sees, a world where the jokes stop and the truth breathes. On the sofa, the other guests shifted awkwardly. Graham exhaled, eyes darting toward the wings. The studio had become a vacuum, laughter replaced by a tension so thick it felt physical. And in the control room, a producer whispered the question everyone was thinking. Is he coming back? No one answered. Because no one knew. The night had shattered its own script, and the world was about to find out why. Behind the red curtain's doorway, the air felt different. Heavier, colder, untouched by the artificial warmth of studio laughter. Ryan's footsteps echoed down the narrow backstage corridor, steady but quick, the kind of pace someone walks when they're outrunning a feeling they don't want the world to witness. He didn't look angry. He didn't even look surprised. He looked tired. The kind of tired that comes from pretending something doesn't hurt. Stepped aside nervously. "Everything okay?" Ryan didn't respond. Not out of rudeness, he simply didn't have the words yet. His thoughts were colliding too fast, emotions outpacing language. Some moments don't need explanation. They just need space. Back on stage, Graham tried to salvage the moment with a laugh that didn't quite fit in his throat. "Well, I may have touched a nerve." The audience chuckled, but the sound was uneven, uncertain, as if they were waiting for a cue that never came. And then, as if fate was choosing sides, the tension deepened. A guest on the sofa leaned toward Graham and whispered, "Should you check on him?" The mic barely caught it. Just a sliver of concern. Thin, but noticeable. Graham hesitated. He had been here before, in moments where humor misfired and a guest retreated. But this felt different. Ryan wasn't a temperamental newcomer or a hot-headed comedian. He was controlled, measured. And for him to leave, something real had cracked. He exhaled and turned to the camera. "All right, folks, let's give Ryan a moment." Another laugh, too soft to mask the discomfort. "He'll be back." But he didn't sound convinced. Cut to the backstage corridor, but without any cuts, just Ryan leaning against the wall, fingers pressed to his eyes. Not crying, just grounding himself. He whispered something to no one in particular, the kind of confession that slips out when you think no one's listening. It wasn't funny. Neurological finally approached, gentle, careful. "Ryan, you don't have to go back out if you don't want to." Ryan lowered his hands. His features were composed again, but the softness behind them didn't lie. "He knows better," he said quietly. "He knows where the line is." He probably didn't mean, "I don't care what he meant." That silence, the one that follows truth spoken too plainly, lingered in the hallway like fog. Aforementioned Graham shifted in his chair. The other guests were trying to stay polite, offering light jokes that felt like walking on cracked glass. Every laugh sounded rehearsed, every breath felt held, and every second without Ryan returning stretched like a rope pulled tight enough to snap. Then Graham muttered something under his breath, barely audible, but the nearest microphone caught it anyway. If he can't take a joke. The band froze, the audience murmured. Producers exchanged quick glances. They knew what was coming, because words like that don't float away quietly, they ricochet. Wilmington, someone relayed the comment to Ryan. It hit him harder than the joke itself. He lifted his head slowly, the calm slipping. "He said that?" Resigned. A nod. Ryan inhaled, deep, steady, controlled. But his hands betrayed him. One tightened into a fist, not in anger, but in pain. The kind of pain that comes from being misunderstood, publicly, instantly, irreversibly. Then he murmured, "He doesn't get to talk about her like that, not like a punchline." Lingering, bravado, no rage, just conviction, raw, unpolished, unfiltered. Bath. The audience's nervous chatter grew, each second feeding the tension like oxygen to a flame. And in the control room, a producer asked the question no one wanted to ask. "Do we cut the segment?" Not yet. He might come back. Might? Shrink. Ryan stayed gone, the more the uncertainty twisted into something dangerous, the kind of suspense that could turn a minor moment into a broadcast wildfire. The backstage corridor vibrated with whispers now, crew members pacing, producers gesturing wildly, assistants holding their breath. And in the middle of it all, Ryan stood absolutely still. He wasn't deciding whether to return. He was deciding whether the show deserved his return. And on the other side of the wall, Graham swallowed his discomfort and tried to regain control. "You know," he began with an uneasy smile, "Ryan's a lovely guy. Truly. But sometimes someone in the crowd gasped. He heard himself and stopped. Too late. Sal, every eye turned toward the curtain. Every breath held. And then, like the air itself was tightening, Ryan stepped back toward the edge of the stage. Not fully returning, not yet, just a shadow, hovering near the divide between public performance and private pain. Low but steady, drifted from the wings. "Finish your sentence." The froze. Graham looked toward the voice, startled, cornered, caught. "I'm listening," Ryan said quietly. "Go on." The audience didn't make a sound. It felt like the floor itself was waiting for the next move. There was no turning back now. The air thickened as Ryan's voice settled over the studio, low, steady, impossible to ignore. And turned toward the shadow just beyond the curtain, where only the outline of him was visible. He wasn't on stage, not fully, but he wasn't backstage anymore either. He stood at the edge of both worlds, daring Graham to step into the truth with him. Graham swallowed hard. "Ryan, I was just saying you're a lovely guy. But sometimes what?" Ryan's tone was soft, but it cut with surgical precision. "Sometimes I don't like jokes about the mother of my children." Expelled through the audience. Not laughter, not shock. Something deeper. The realization that they were witnessing a moment no one could laugh away. Graham shifted in his seat, trying to find the safer version of the sentence he had started. "I just meant, you can be sensitive." Ryan stepped through the curtain. The lights hit him fully again, but this time he was different. Colder around the edges, eyes sharper, posture tight. He didn't return to the sofa. He stood beside it, grounded, unmoving. "Sensitive," he repeated quietly, as if tasting the word. "You think that's what this is?" Graham's smile faltered. "It was just a joke." Then why did everyone stop laughing? The question hung in the air like an accusation, even though Ryan hadn't raised his voice. He didn't need volume. His calm was louder than anger could ever be. The band fell silent. The other guests stayed painfully still. The audience held its breath. Graham attempted a lighter tone. "Look, if I went too far, I apologize, truly. It wasn't meant to upset you." Ryan nodded, but it wasn't acceptance. It was disbelief. "You didn't upset me." A pause. "You disrespected her." The studio tightened again, this time with something electric, something volatile. "I wasn't." "You were," Ryan cut in, but gently. "And you know you were. You've been doing this a long time. You know exactly when a joke crosses from playful to personal." Exhaled slowly, the fight draining from his face. "Okay, but you can't just walk out when you don't like a question." Eyebrows lifted slightly. "Watch me." A gasp rippled through the crowd, raw, involuntary. Graham blinked, taken aback. "So that's it? You get to decide when the interview ends?" Ryan tilted his head. You crossed the line. I walked away. That's called having boundaries, not being sensitive. Something flickered in Graham's expression. Defensiveness, maybe pride. The kind that rises when someone challenges a persona polished by years of control. He leaned forward slightly. You know, a lot of actors come on this show. They laugh, they banter, they take a joke. Ryan stepped closer, not threatening, but firm. A joke about my girlfriend. About the person who kept our family out of the spotlight for years because she didn't want our kids dragged into this circus? That's what you expect me to laugh at. The silence that followed felt like gravity bending. In the audience, a woman whispered, "Oh God." Another murmured, "This is real, isn't it?" Graham tried again, softer. "I wasn't dragging your family into anything." Ryan's jaw tensed, but his voice stayed controlled. Too controlled. "You made her a punchline." Graham rubbed his hands together, a rare show of nerves. "It wasn't meant that way." "In race impact," Ryan said quietly. Those 5 words hit harder than any outburst could have. Graham stared at him, searching for an angle that would undo the tension, something to regain equilibrium. But nothing came. So the truth rushed in to fill the void. "You know," Ryan continued, "Eva doesn't do interviews. Not because she's shy, not because she's fragile, because she knows one joke, one headline, one offhand remark is all it takes to turn something real into something cheap." Graham looked down. The audience didn't move. No one dared breathe. "And tonight," Ryan said, softer now, "you proved her right." Graham's voice broke slightly. "Ryan, I didn't mean to hurt you. You didn't hurt me." The pause was long enough to make stomachs drop. "You embarrassed me." Graham's breath caught. The truth landed, heavy and unshakable. "I came here to talk about my film," Ryan continued. "Not defend the woman I love on national television." Graham leaned back, something deflating in him. Not defeat, realization. Stepped back toward the curtain, and for a terrifying moment it looked like he might leave again. A producer flinched, then the audience froze. But then Ryan turned, slowly, and lowered himself into the spot he'd abandoned earlier. The red sofa creaked softly under the weight of the decision. He was giving the show one more chance. Graham exhaled invisible relief. And that's when Ryan said it. "We can keep talking, but we don't go back to that joke. Not again." Graham nodded. "Okay." But the tension didn't disappear. It just hovered, thin, fragile, like glass stretched to its limit. The audience felt it. The guests felt it. The band felt it. Salmon understood. This was only calm on the surface. The next misstep would break everything. And no one could predict who would make it. For a moment, the studio seemed to settle. Not comfortably, nothing about the atmosphere felt safe, but the worst of the storm appeared to have passed. Ryan sat upright, hands clasped loosely, eyes fixed on the floor as if studying the seams in the carpet. Graham adjusted his cards with stiff fingers, the humor drained from him entirely. "All right," Graham said quietly, "let's reset." The audience laughed, but only because they were supposed to. The sound felt borrowed, like a laugh track from another show. Ryan didn't look up. The next guest tried to rescue the energy with a harmless anecdote, something about a costume mishap, a zipper, a red carpet moment gone wrong. But even their voice trembled slightly, as if they too were afraid of saying the wrong thing. Simmons lifted as Ryan lifted his head halfway through the story. He smiled, barely, to show he was listening, but the smile didn't reach his eyes. Not yet. The ended. A few claps, awkward, thin. Then Graham tried to pick up the thread again. "Well, we've all had embarrassing moments in Hollywood. A harmless line, a safe line. But he didn't stop there. He shouldn't have continued. But some people," he added with a soft, nervous laugh, seem to take theirs more seriously than others. Expelled. The studio air snapped like a wire. Ryan's expressions flickered, shock first, then disappointment, and beneath it, something more fragile, something that looked like betrayal. The other guests froze. Graham realized instantly what he'd done. "I didn't mean—" "You did," Ryan interrupted, softly, heartbreakingly soft. "You meant it enough to say it." This time he didn't stand slowly. He stood like something inside him simply gave way. The dramatic flourish, no outrage, no raised voice. Just a quiet man walking away for the second time. The audience gasped again, louder than before, the sound bouncing off the walls like startled birds. Someone whispered, "Not again." But Ryan didn't look back. He didn't even hesitate. He disappeared through the same curtain, swallowed by the same shadow, leaving behind an emptiness the studio lights couldn't fill. Graham froze in place, staring at the empty space where Ryan had been. For a host who lived on improvisation, he suddenly had no words, no escape route, no punchline. The silence grew painful. A producer's voice crackled anxiously in the host's earpiece. "Go after him. Now." Graham swallowed, nodded subtly, then rose from his chair with the stiffness of someone about to walk into consequences they weren't prepared for. He pushed through the curtain, stepping into the dim corridor behind the stage. The noise of the studio faded into a dull hum, leaving only the sound of his shoes tapping against the concrete floor. He found Ryan halfway down the hallway, leaning against the wall with his hands gripping his hair, not in anger, but in frustration, in exhaustion, in the effort of holding back too much. Graham said, voice low, careful, stripped of the confidence he used on camera. "Please, talk to me." Ryan didn't turn. "You don't know when to stop." His voice cracked on the last word. Not from tears, from restraint. "I crossed a line," Graham admitted. The words sounded foreign in his mouth. "I know I did. I'm sorry." "Do you know which line?" Ryan asked without looking up. Graham hesitated. "I think so." "Then say it." The challenge hit harder in the quiet hallway than anything said on stage. Graham exhaled. "I made fun of something you didn't consent to joke about." Still not enough. Ryan finally turned to him, eyes sharp but glistening with something deeper. Disappointment, layered over hurt, layered over love. "You turned the person I love into a prop," he said. "And then you mocked me for caring." Graham nodded slowly. Shame replaced every trace of bravado. "You're right." A long, aching silence. "I'm truly sorry," he added. And this time, he meant it. Ryan studied him, searching for sincerity. There was a long pause, long enough that Graham's nervous breathing became part of the tension. Then Ryan exhaled and looked away. "This show has given me some of the best laughs I've had on television. Tonight wasn't supposed to be different." "I know," Graham whispered. "Let me fix this. Come back out with me. Please." Ryan didn't answer immediately. He stared down the corridor as if replaying the entire night in the cracks of the concrete. Then, finally, he nodded once. Reluctant, slow, but real. The return wasn't triumphant. There was no applause, no fanfare. Just two men re-entering the studio like they'd survived a storm no one planned for. The audience straightened in their seats, some clutching the edge of their chairs, others holding their breath. When Ryan stepped into view again, they didn't cheer. They didn't clap. They didn't dare. They simply watched. Before a new kind of tension formed. Softer, but far more dangerous. Because now everyone knew the next mistake would be the last. Ryan sat down again. Graham followed,
Quieter, humbled, a little shaken.
"All right," the host said, voice faint. "Let's try this again." But even as they forced a semblance of calm, even as the show struggled to stitch itself back together, everyone sensed it. The fault line beneath the table, trembling, waiting. And the night wasn't finished breaking. Not yet. They tried to move forward. The show limped back into its rhythm, every laugh delayed, every breath measured. Ryan sat still, posture guarded, hands clasped like he was holding the moment together by force alone. Graham avoided eye contact, sticking to safe questions, safer jokes. But the air had changed. It felt thinner, brittle, like one wrong word could make the whole room fracture. And then it happened. A harmless slip, a nervous attempt at humor. Graham meant it to lighten the mood, a small, clumsy line tossed into the silence. "Let's hope this interview doesn't end in another dramatic exit." He said it laughing. The audience didn't. Ryan's head lowered, slowly. A single exhale left him, long and defeated. Not angry, not even surprised, just done. He stood, quietly. No hesitation this time. Misinformation, Graham's eyes widened. "Ryan!" But Ryan didn't look back. He stepped away from the sofa, from the lights, from the tight smiles and fragile peace. The curtain parted around him like it had been waiting. He disappeared behind it, for the last time. The audience stayed frozen in their seats. No applause, no chatter, just a numb silence settling over the studio like dust. Graham exhaled shakily, staring at the empty space where the night had unraveled. "All right, we'll take a break," he whispered, voice cracking. The truth lingered long after the cameras stopped. Sometimes a joke doesn't break the silence. Sometimes it breaks the person. And sometimes walking away isn't quitting. It's remembering who you were before the noise.